Okay, we are live. We are with Jon Claffey and Matt Neely from Edge. We're going to let people come on and join us. Interesting is they are reversed. So their names and the people are not there, but you guys have seen them before. So switch that up. And we're going to let some people come in and join us. But the biggest thing I wanted to discuss...
We were too lazy to just switch seats.
Well, that would have been, doing a whole lot of work of moving and things like that. But we've had Jon on before to discuss everything, including your background. But Matt, we haven't had the chance to dive into your background a little bit because it's pretty interesting from a golf side of things. Can you kind of give people a rundown on how you ended up at Edge?
Yeah, sure. So I majored in mechanical engineering out of school. I grew up in Carlsbad, where all the golf companies are. And when I found out
Illinois, how weird is that?
Yeah, I know. Well, I didn't really choose it. It chose me. But so when I found out that people design golf clubs for a living, I played college golf. I decided that was what I really wanted to do. But it's kind of a hard industry to get into. So I just kept applying and got my start in golf at Adams Golf for a few years.
You worked with a good friend of mine there, and Michael.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep. So loved Adams Golf, learned a ton there. Really kind of a similar vibe to what we have at Edge, with kind of a smaller team doing lots of really cool work. Then when Adams eventually shut down with the TaylorMade purchase, I stayed on with TaylorMade. I got another opportunity to move back to Texas to go to Nike Golf. Then Nike Golf had some problems, as you may know, not related to me. Neither was the Adams shutdown, so not my fault. And then I got out of golf. Yeah. Got out of golf for a little while, but just loved it so much. And finally got a call from Edge to head up product development, R&D efforts, and came on board to join the awesome team here about, it's been 2.5 years now. So, and a million different product launches, it feels like.
You've worked with a lot of my friends over the years, but that's for sharing over some Portillos that we were talking about before we went live.
Yeah.
Now we're live on YouTube, but we're also live on the THP forum. So I'm getting questions from everywhere. I wanted to start with one that I've been getting for some weird reason. I shouldn't say weird, but I keep getting the question. It comes in my inbox on social media or email about once a week, and they want to know when you will be updating a wedge, because apparently this one was really well liked. This is the CBX blade, but there's been a few others. When will be the next wedge from Exotics?
Oh, when?
If you can tell us.
We can't tell you when. We can tell you that, yes, there will be a new wedge. That isn't the most current. After that, we did update the CBX blade into the EXS blade.
Yes.
Which is in play on tour still, and we're that's still in line for us, as are the EXS Pro Forged irons and the EXS blade irons. So I
got to post this because I'm going to throw some questions up. But this one is regarding Matt. What a history! They should call him the Reaper. I'm going to start feeding you guys some questions, and I'm going to intermingle some that I've gotten already throughout, but they're going to come on the bottom of the screen. I'll read them aloud for others. How well are Exotics irons doing? The 722 and 722 series. That's different. Look so much better than past irons. How are they doing? How have they been received?
They just were received.
Thanks for the brilliant insight from Jon Claffey.
No, they're testing through the roof. I'll let Matt kind of break down a little bit of what R&D did on that side, but obviously
I have the E series here.
Yep. So I think C and E is where we started. It was the only part of 721 last year where we had a distinction between the two. The E standing for extreme spec, which is really going to be your more forgiving models that with a little bit more playability, and your C spec competition spec, which are a little bit more for your players. We took a step in both directions more towards C and more towards E, even further with 722. So I think that just benefits everybody out there in the two different player types that we've identified that exist.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of like what Jon said. Last year, the irons were the only thing that we had E and a C. And as you'll see with the rest of the lineup, we now have kind of expanded that everywhere. But the E irons, like we basically kind of added a little more offset, a little more top line thickness. They just got a little bit bigger. And then the C irons, kind of our biggest feedback we had on the C721 irons, particularly from our tour staff, was that they just looked a little bit too big for kind of that player type. Now, despite that, we still had, we had 4 sets in play at one point on tour. Tim Petrovic's been one of the guys that's had them in the bag. But, one of the, more hurtful pieces of feedback was that the long irons kind of look like a hockey stick. So I, of course, always take that to heart. But so we pretty much kind of thinned everything up by around, I say 10 to 15% on the C irons. And I think the biggest piece of positive feedback there is that I think all the guys that were playing the C721 irons out on tour have very quickly switched or are at least seriously testing the 722 irons.
Interesting.
Yep.
Petrovic has been the first to put the C722 into play. And Tim is one of those different kind of tour players where he's just going to play. He'll try anything, right? But he's definitely have his player preferences. Like the guy could one day be playing blades and the next day be playing the player's distance category. But what keeps happening to him and what he keeps kind of, I wouldn't say complaining, but what he keeps telling me is that every time I put the C series in play, the first event I play, I get a runner-up finish. And so he's like, then what do I do? So it's at least in play for the next few events after that before he starts thinking like a golfer again.
Wow, that sounds eerily familiar, minus the skill set. So I'm also holding a club that I think isn't getting enough talk, both by Tour Edge, sorry, John, and by our readers, and that's this utility club. Now, the reason I say that is, number one, it's really sleek looking. But number two, the weight is unique because, we do have different weights to change, both swing weight. One of the questions I have, because I did this test, is I changed the weights. And not only did I get a slightly different sound profile, but I definitely saw a different ball flight. Now, part of that is, unlike a lot of people on the internet, I'm human and I do miss. Will more weight directly behind that influence that in a spin and launch profile?
In most of our robot testing, considering that's why most irons, even a bigger iron like this utility iron, typically don't have much adjustable weight, even heel and toe or front and back. One, there's just not much room. The other thing is that it's just not moving the center of gravity really that much. There's just such a small window. So we'll definitely see a different sound with all of our weights, which is one of the biggest things that we actually have to do during our testing. And it's always like the last thing. It's like, oh gosh, did we put in all the weights and see what everything sounds like? Because of course, we design it stock to have a 10 grammer in there, but there are certainly people who might cut it down by 1.5 inches and want a 25 grammer or just want to play it at, D7. But so at least in our robot testing, changing the weight hasn't really changed. We don't see too much of a change in launch characteristic. It could just be that because it was a little heavier, a little different, you're just kind of swinging it a little bit differently. The sound thing we would for sure expect because we are kind of moving some weight in a slightly different location. But we wouldn't preach or say that we're going to see a huge launch difference with the different weights.
Swing weight optimization is basically the number one thing that it does.
Well, and I appreciate you guys having the weights available for both this and the drivers that are behind me there, because I do think that people do want to tinker, and we're getting to that age where everybody wants to tinker. Yeah. So I'm going to start jumping into some questions.
Well, I can add a little bit more to the utility iron real quick. It's just a market that I think people may think is a little bigger than it actually is. These are low stinging, clubs that come up every year when the British Open is about to be played. You get a big increase in influx of pros that are looking for these clubs. But it's starting to kind of break through where people are realizing if I get a 2 or 3 iron and I'm hitting this off the tee, it is the straightest club I'm going to hit with a low spin properties and a little bit lower ball flight, so I get a little bit more run out.
Plus, you guys are able to pack a whole lot of forgiveness in this now.
So I think it's a market that's about to break through, and I'm biased, of course, but I feel like we have a top utility iron on the market. We are the only one that has a titanium face. And so I think from everything we've tested out, we provide more ball speed off the face than any other utility iron out there.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions, then I'm going to go back to the one I splashed on the screen from Dean. The first is, it came through as we've been live. You talked about the more separation between C and E, which I thought makes a ton of sense. Can you combo set them?
Well, yeah, you definitely can combo set them. The lofts are a little bit different, although because we kind of the E kind of has your typical super game improvement loft spectrum, similar to just about everybody else on the market. There, a little bit stronger,
and they do launch a little higher. I noticed,
and they do launch a little bit higher. That's kind of why we can afford to have them another 2 degrees or so stronger. And then the C's are kind of more in that player's distance iron, so maybe, I guess I just don't have the numbers right here. Probably should know them exactly, but around 2 to 3 degrees weaker, depending on the stick. So it probably would require some fine tuning of, actually, so I currently play a combo set of C irons with my old EXS Pro irons,
right.
Which, I'm sure people are asking when we're going to be updating those. But because the C irons are kind of a little bit of a different distance animal, I actually play 2 7 irons. So it's kind of because the C 7 iron will go quite a bit further than I would have a huge gap from the 7 iron to the 8 iron. So that's kind of what you would require if you were to combo set the C and E. They're not really meant to probably be a direct drop in, but you certainly could.
You could. You could even quadruple combo and do the C and E hybrids along with the C and E irons.
Oh, you're preaching to me now.
Pro,
that's maybe. the whole point. The whole point of the 722 series was to expand our fitting matrix. We did so probably by 5-fold, I would say.
Yeah.
And so we literally have gone from being able to dial you in one player to being that now we can fit one out of every 2 players, because it's just we have an option for everybody, every little loft along the way. So you can combo whatever you need to combo, but you now have those options with the 722.
That's strong. Okay, so I'm going to start going through some questions here, and then I want to dive into the drivers a little bit. Any updates coming to the putter? The wingman was, I'll call it, and I've said this to you before, polarizing. People who liked it, loved it. People who didn't, hated it. I'm more on the liked it side because I liked the amount of security blanket, I'll call it, to be aligned. The more, the better for me, because clearly I'm blind. But
I can tell you that we have not launched everything that we're launching for 2022 yet.
Oh. You guys hear that?
Look at that poker face too.
Yeah. Remind me, I want to play poker with Jon at some point.
Talking about all the questions with the wedges and the irons and the putters. I mean, we're not done launching this year quite yet.
That's a very interesting tidbit that I did not know about. I'm going through all these questions right now. So this is an interesting one, and we get this a lot. For recommended speed tested shafts with a robot, what is the most distance dispersion or combination that have led to some of those recommendations?
I would say it's a combination of both. I think if you think about that total driving statistic that you would look at of, total distance and, how consistent we are off center. Is kind of how we dial in those shafts. We're also able to look at ball speed on those. So it's kind of it's a pretty big combination matrix that we look at of all the shafts that we test in those different swing speed buckets. I would say one of the coolest things that we can do on our robot is really fine tune the swing. It's not just the same swing and just dialed down or dialed up for speed. We can actually tweak the swing to the various characteristics that we would typically see in an average 85 mile per hour swing versus the average 115 mile per hour swing. They're kind of a different person, and we're going on averages, but that's it's not just dialing it up or down. So that's why they truly do end up being totally different shafts in those different worlds that we kind of throw out there. But to answer the question, it's really a combination of both distance and dispersion that kind of leads us to make those decisions on what we put in there.
This question's for Jon. Does that conference room smell like rich mahogany? Having been there many times, it does not, but it doesn't smell bad.
That doesn't mean we're not a big deal over here. I get the reference.
We do have leather-bound.
I get the reference.
Leather-bound books are over there. We can't see them, but.
And Dan,
somebody's asking what I'm drinking. Ironically enough, it's Pedialyte, and it's not because I'm hungover or anything. I didn't even have drinks last night. It happened to be what's in the cupboard, and that's what I wanted to drink.
That's good.
Nice.
Okay.
The Lunatic Fringe loves utility irons. We are the Lunatic Fringe, so I would agree with that. There's so many thoughts on the utility. I don't think people even realized it was there. You guys should read our website. I know you do, but you should. I want to talk a little bit about the drivers because there's 2 options.
Yep.
And they're very similar and unique, which tells everybody nothing. But when you first see them, the first thing you look at is the C version has the 2 weights, and James just did a review on that. It's up as of yesterday, yesterday, I believe. And he saw a fairly massive gain when switching these, 400 or 500 RPMs a spin. On the E, you just have the 1 weight back. Obviously, you sell other weights, again, swing weight, but that will definitely change some I would say, some parameters as you switch. This is one test I haven't done yet. But I feel like right now, when speaking about them, people assume we have a game improvement driver, which I hate categories in golf now, and a player's driver. But that's not really the case, because when I took it and I started doing measurements, normally with a game improvement driver, you see massive amounts of offset or something like that. You're not seeing that with this. Can you kind of walk people through the difference between what you're kind of seeing between the difference between these two and what they really are in a marketing sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start and then leave it to the guy.
That was the longest question ever, by the way.
I'll leave it to the guy to answer the technical stuff on the design of the product. But basically, yes, we have both in play on the PGA Tour Champions already. I think we've had 10 drivers in play on C side on the first 4 events, and we've had 8 on the E side in play in the first 4 events. So 18 total drivers, pretty close to each other. The E is not super game improvement, but it is extremely high moment of inertia. It's got a 5,500 grams per cubic centimeter squared MOI rating, which if there's higher out there, maybe there's one higher. I don't know. We're in the upper echelon of MOI with this head. With C, not only do those back weights adjust, CG, but they also adjust MOI. And MOI is not always going to be your best friend. A high MOI for a super heavy swinger can sometimes hurt you. So you not only are doing CG adjustment with those back and front weights on the C, you're doing MOI adjustment. So
Would you say part of that is because of closure rate? Sometimes a higher MOI driver can be harder on closure rate. I could be wrong on that, but that's just what we found in our testing. And somebody who's in that realm could struggle with closure.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that the C does kind of have the ability to go to that lower MOI, because it is maybe for a little bit better player. But really, when you're talking in, while E and C are different animals, as Jon mentioned, the E is certainly not as game improvement E as like our hot launch E 523 or 522 or 521 product was. And that was kind of a decision we made. So, I would say the E and C families kind of came about of growing was when we started getting C721 out into the world, particularly the driver. We found it was an incredible performer for a lot of the higher swing speed guys. It had a pretty far forward. It had a pretty far forward CG, middle of the road MOI 4,800 to 5,000. But we were just seeing that we weren't really, kind of to Jon's point earlier, we didn't really have a great fitting umbrella. We were kind of stuck with one player type. So initially it kind of started, let's turn this C driver into 2 drivers in one. So let's give it
that is a badass pull apart.
Yeah. And here's the carbon fiber wings that attach on the outside. Wrong side.
Mm-hmm.
But so, that's kind of how we started there. And then when we decided to introduce the E family, it was largely to target some of the slightly lower swing speed guys, but also the guys that just need a little more spin, but not, initially we did talk about like, let's make this an offset exotics driver. Let's get rid of adjustability. Let's make it kind of this extreme draw closed face. But we didn't want to go that far with it. Who knows what exotics holds in the future? Maybe it does. But we really were just trying to expand our fitting umbrella a little bit. So the E is certainly a little bit bigger. It goes to that full USGA limit of 460 cc's. The C driver is closer to 445, so a little bit smaller. So that's kind of one difference. The E has a slightly larger face, so a little bit more forgiveness all across the face. And then it's really just that CG property. So we've got in the C driver, it's got this one big honking 30-gram weight that's in the back, and it's really heavy. If you threw this at somebody, it would hurt quite a bit. So it's just a really big weight that gets the CG. Pretty much every extra piece of weight we had in that E-driver is all the way in the back. And that's what gets it that really high MOI, a little bit more launch and a little bit more spin. It's really good to hear those numbers in the testing. It'll be interesting to see when you guys get the E and do some testing there. But we have seen on the robot from, the C driver in the forward weight setting to the C driver in the rear weight settings, anywhere from 300 to 500 RPM increase, and then maybe another 300 to 500 when we go to that E, if all lofts are, apples to apples. So, which is really great. Having 1,000 RPM fitting range is just huge for making sure that we can really accommodate a lot of golfers.
It's interesting when I did some testing side by side, and again, I'm a steeper player, so usually I'll say high spin, but in today's market that doesn't really exist, I think, in the driver model so much. I mean, when 3,000 online is considered high spin, we're doing something either right or wrong. I don't know, depending on who you talk to. I was seeing from weight in back of both models about 450 RPMs of spin difference between them. And I was still under 2,900 on average with the E. And when you play in the South like I do and you're not getting a lot of roll, that's a pretty darn good number.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure.
I'd say E I'd say E safely falls into the categorization of mid spin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jon, this question's probably for you. How much pandemic, war, world supply chain is being encountered? We were kind of talking about that before we went live.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're in a golf boom, and it's a golf boom that hasn't reached critical mass yet. It's growing at this still. So it's the hard part is meeting demand. It is not that stuff is not available. It's harder to get stuff. It sits at port a lot longer, and where we make our club heads, it takes a little bit longer to get than usual. But that being said, we've had to really learn how to face those challenges to get everything here on time. And we haven't turned back our 48-hour custom fitting quite yet because of it's just been a hard thing to navigate. But I think we'll get there. That being said, I mean, it's just we are now receiving 2 containers a day, and that is something that we've never even thought was possible. So we've had to get a whole team to unload these containers, and that's all they do. And we've had to bring in 6 more customer service people since the start of this
boom. We've opened up another production line.
We're actually going to use the land that we own right next to us to start building a new facility. So it's everything is all about growth, and meeting the demand that's out there is challenging.
That's
but it's
fantastic.
It's a whole new challenge from what we've had to face before, where we used to have to be experts on how to get rid of excess inventory. Now it's just all about how do you get everybody out there what they need. So it's a pretty good problem to have.
Going back to the E driver, does it have much draw bias? I'm not going to go with offset because that's measurable, but internally, what are we looking at draw bias wise? Because I didn't counter much at all.
Yeah, so we see the E driver going a little bit more left. So we have the CG on the E driver slightly more heelward. So that kind of means on a center strike, you'll kind of have a little bit more of that gear effect that will kind of help out the draw just a little bit. And as far as we designed it for face angle, we have the C driver at about 4 degrees open if you set it down, and the E driver is around 2 degrees open. So they're both still open, but the
I'm not crazy.
Yeah, so
I measured these in our studio here, and people are like, "Oh, it's draw biased." And it might be, but measurement-wise, I was getting a 1.5 degrees open on the E.
Oh,
and I know most people get confused because most drivers nowadays are open.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is by design. Part of it is because of the preferred look. There you go. But do you think bulge and roll plays a role in the design process of making them open, or is it just what people want now?
Oh no, bulge and roll for sure, and it's really So we have various bulge and rolls across the face, and they're slightly different on C&E. We won't go into what those are, but that is definitely one of the things that we have to look at when we're designing how it looks from a dress. To your point, I would, in today's day and age and what people like looking at, I'd almost call 2 degrees open at this point square. Some of the drivers we look at in the market, and, we've even toyed with it in some of our tour product, we're pushing 7 degrees open. But really, if you look at it and set it down, it doesn't look that crazy. And, a lot of people square it up before they swing. So, open, and we kind of, especially on things that we plan for better players to be playing and people that like looking down at golf clubs, we always kind of skew a little bit towards being a little bit more open, because if you're setting the ball behind the club, you can kind of always close it a little bit if you want. You can always play around with the loft sleeve if you want to really see that square face, but it's really hard when something looks closed to make it look open, and that's kind of really polarizing for a lot of people. So we really only go to that closed look on like our E522 stuff that is really designed to be like, I really, really, really don't want to hit a slice. It's extremely draw bias. So I'd say from
Jon, I think he's talking about me.
But yeah, in the E722 driver, we're really kind of, slightly more draw bias than the C, but certainly not anywhere in that super duper crazy offset world.
Yep.
You guys touched on this a little bit, and I think your messaging about the shafts and how you choose them is some of the best out there, because you actually relay the information on how you do it. But how do you choose the ones that are standard? Like if I walk into a golf store and Tour Edge Exotics is sitting there, there's one choice usually. How do you choose that one?
Yeah, so that's through our speed testing. And, I think at least what you're supposed to see at the shelf, they'll kind of see it matched up with our speed testing. So in the lighter flex product, like the R, the ladies flex, senior flex, you'll probably see a lot of our Fujikura Air Speeder. Then when you jump up into our R and S range, it should be mostly our Ventus Red. And then a little stiffer goes into our Ventus Blue. So that's, so it's based on our speed testing. Of course, what's available. If we test something and it's incredible and the shaft vendor says we can't use it, well, then we can't use it. So it's kind of a combination of the two, but for the most part, it's all of our speed testing. And we've been really lucky in that the shafts that speed test the best, we've been able to do it all early enough that we've been able to put those exact shafts in the product. That kind of goes towards the supply chain question a little bit. It's really just required us getting a head start and working even sooner than we have in the past, spreading out our vendors by, even more than we have in the past, just to ensure that, our bets are really hedged, that we'll have all of our product in place when we're supposed to.
Yeah, we test most everything. Ted's always swinging up there, testing something. I mean, sometimes it's little minute stuff that you wouldn't think about, but the swing robot being in-house has been huge for us. TED stands for Tour Edge Development. We're going to start a little series here soon called TED Shots instead of TED Talks. We're going to start showing some of this work we do.
Please take this idea and run with it, which is when everybody's out. I don't want you to do this when people are in the warehouse. You got to relive the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird thing, the horse commercial for McDonald's, and you got to call bank shots off the walls in the warehouse.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, you might hurt somebody if you did it while opening, but this is a question that's interesting because I think you guys could both answer it, which is the difference between the two hybrids. And I've spent no time with the hybrids other than holding them. I've liked what I've seen so far in a look, but they are really different golf clubs. If you named these differently, you would never get this question, which is rather unique for a line to come out like that.
So, I'd call that E722 hybrid really in the kind of, I don't know, maybe you'd call it like a fairway wood / hybrid, as CB has kind of mentioned here. It is kind of, almost to that front to back dimension that you would see in a fairway. It has a more round face, so more heel to toe camber, so more like a fairway wood versus an iron. So this is kind of meant for those folks that have just never agreed with a 5-wood, that face progression that you see on a 5-wood. So it's kind of got a little more offset than you would have in a 5-wood. Comparing it to the C hybrid, it's going to be launching and spinning just a little bit higher. But then again, this C hybrid has kind of been designed as a direct iron replacement. The face, the leading edge is really that square iron type.
Boy, that has some influence from your past iterations of career moves.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like,
um,
when you look at those hybrids, everybody goes back to two companies, one you worked for and one you worked for.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they've gotten so much better since those days. I mean, light years better than an old Adams or a Kent 40X, which was one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even
that
say
is what that club is the epitome of what you think about when you think of hybrid, is something that looks like that.
And it's crazy because those specific products, they're still in play on tour today. And I think everybody in the market kind of makes one of these hybrids that looks very iron-like. It's very reminiscent of that certain product type. And
now I'm going to throw a curveball at you with that, which is, you just said everybody makes one that's something like that. Can you, as a person who designed something back then to designing something now, talk about, just because it's the same shape, how wildly different they are? Because they really are completely different clubs. This is far superior in every way possible.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that we've had advancements at this point is the ability to use some really interesting and high strength stainless steels and different face materials. That's really enabled us to create a lot more of what I would call full face forgiveness on those things. So they're going to be a lot more forgiving than those past products. We've kind of been able the products from a launch and spin. Are we good? Oh, okay. Sorry.
We had a quick glitch, but we're good.
Yeah. So, the biggest advancement is kind of, I would say, face material on those products. We've also been able to kind of, via some of those different manufacturing methods, really fine tune our CG properties. And I think the amount of robot testing and samples and prototypes that we've been able to do with these really enable us to hit the exact numbers that we're going for to kind of create this kind of drop and stop iron type of replacement product, and have made it even better.
Plus, the sound and feel is night and day. I mean, especially on this big guy with the carbon crown. I mean, this thing is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it feels just as gorgeous.
And I would say one of the biggest things, especially out on tour and with the better players on the C hybrid, has been adding this adjustability. So it's plus or minus 1.5 degrees around the sleeve. And that has been really, really huge. When somebody, is trying to replace their hybrid or iron that they need to go 217, and we're at, let's call it 213, and they just need a little bit longer, we can strengthen it by 0.5 degree and see those changes right on the spot. And while that, might not seem huge, it's super helpful, for those really fine tuning things with some of these guys. And the tour players are obviously totally different animals.
With a hybrid, all they want is I need the 220 club. That's all they say. I need to go 220. That's it. That's all they want. Can't go left, can't balloon, but 220. If you can give me that, that's what I'm looking for. So it's our first adjustable hybrid in an exotics club ever. It's our first adjustable fairway since 2016. So we're back into the adjustable game and on something other than driver. We're all grown up.
I wanted to bring this. It's more of a statement than a question, that the C hybrid, the E hybrid, and the UT battle. You guys have obviously done that. Where did you fall, and what kind of thought process went into making your personal choices? You create your bag each year. I mean, you guys can't go out to an event and be playing old technology.
Utility iron usually gets the nod for most people off the tee, in my experience. And like, Tim Petrovic plays 2 utility irons and a hybrid, and he uses the 2 and 3 off the tee almost primarily, whereas he's got the hybrid in play for off the deck or out of the rough. So I think that's one of the things you want to ask yourself right there. Those, especially the lower lofty utilities, end up being just a monster off the tee. Tim hits his number 275 on average, and he's not the heaviest swinger you've ever seen. But
hey, that C versus E versus utility battle sounds like a good TED.
Sounds like
TED test.
TED shots.
Yeah, I like that. I'm here to help.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at the tour players that you guys have, and it's no secret, you guys target the Champions Tour, PGA Tour of Champions. What is it called now?
PGA Tour Champions.
Thank you. The transition on that tour is fascinating to me. Because for years, players there didn't change equipment. They were older, stuck in their ways. It was more ball flight driven, more eyeball driven. Now you're having a group of players come to that grew up with launch monitors and tour vans and everything and getting fit. Have you seen their feedback become more useful, I guess is the best way to say it, than previously, where it might have been like, oh yeah, I need it open because it's an eyeball thing versus actual data?
I actually think they're easier to deal with. You look at some of the old school guys who like to do the tinkering themselves. And, when was the last time Mark Brooks played an event where he didn't take out, every single club that he just put into play in the previous event? There are guys like that. And, so I think the guys coming up that have a lot of experience with, being fit and looking at numbers on launch monitors are a little bit easier to deal with, because you can easily convince them that this is the better club, because they trust what they're seeing on TrackMan out there. So I think it's actually become a lot easier these days to say the proof is in the pudding. Look at the numbers. We're 10 yards further. We've got tighter dispersion and we're lower spinning for you. So I think whereas some of the older guys would just kind of be like, well, it just doesn't feel right. I'm just not comfortable. So I think data is actually making it easier to get
for sure
in play.
That feedback of it just doesn't feel right, it's not comfortable. However many years ago, that was where the conversation ended. But now, as Jon said, we usually at least have numbers there to at least continue the conversation and be like, okay, we get that. What can we tweak? But look at this. We're hitting this, we're launching this another degree higher with 300 RPM less spin. It's carrying an extra 8 yards. I know it might not feel right to you now, but you can take 10 more swings with it and it might feel great when you're hitting it 15 yards past your old driver. So it does, in a lot of cases, allow the conversation to continue, or it solidifies the decision even bit more when they love how it feels, love how it sounds, and say, boom, look at this. It's doing a lot better than your product. So I think, it's made some of the guys maybe a little bit more of a pain, because some of them get really into the weeds, but I do think it really helps solidify their confidence in what we're doing.
Well, plus we look at all their stats on a week-to-week basis. So if they ever have a bad driving week, we just kind of show up at the next event. How you doing?
I need to know the answer to this question.
Bo Jackson. So as for some of you who watching who don't know, Bo Jackson is a Chicago guy. He's been living here since his White Sox days. He's been a friend of the company's for a good 6 years, 8 years, even longer probably. But he's been ever since Nike went down. Thanks, Matt. Ever since Nike went down, he's been playing nothing but Tour Edge, and just by choice. Last year, I think, was the first year we officially made him an ambassador of the company. And this year, we put him in our TV spot. So there's one spot out there that features Bo Jackson with a little cameo ending our ad, with a little nod to the Bo Knows campaign of past. We've got 4 more coming that feature Bo and all of our 8 current staff players. But Bo hits his driver about 325 on average. And so he is a heavy hitter. He
Does
hits
it go like this, like most of the baseball players go?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He hits
so straight, it would go about 400 yards.
But he hits his 3-wood about 300, if he really pokes it. And so he's a really fast swinger who, needs low spin. He's going to be playing the C. We're going to have him in here soon for his 722 fitting.
Sounds like a good video segment there too. Now, since I'm a big Matt Neely fan, I'm going to say, Bo was with Nike, Matt Neely goes to Tour Edge, and all of a sudden Bo's at Tour Edge. So,
I think so. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, those numbers don't check out. But
the years are a little bit off. Maybe he knew I was coming. He was,
We love Bo. He's awesome. He's such a down-to-earth guy for being one of the best athletes of all time. He comes in here. He likes to tinker on clubs. He likes to, in his basement, he'll tinker on clubs for hours, and it's one of his hobbies.
Well, he's an archery guy too, so I would assume he knows graphite pretty well.
Yeah, he's just an awesome dude to hang out with and hear stories from him. Love hearing the running over Brian Bosworth story from him. It's an all-time classic.
I get this question probably once a week from every brand that doesn't make a golf ball. And I'm going to ask you guys the same thing. Jon, you came from a golf ball background. Will Tour Edge come out with a golf ball at some point?
Nope.
Boy, man, a few words.
Golf ball market is the golf ball market. It's not something to take lightly and just dive into and try it out. I mean, hey, maybe we make something for promotional purposes or whatever, but I don't see it happening. Matt?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. You have more information than I do. You're the golf ball guy.
With the launch that just happened, those clubs are in stores now, shipping now. People can get their hands on them. Do you have a recommendation from that person that just he doesn't have a fitter locally? He doesn't want to go to a fitter. Maybe he doesn't like to swing in front of people, or he doesn't hit well indoors. What's the best way for them to choose which club is right for them out of the E and C line if they're looking for drivers and irons?
Call us. We take pride in our customer care department. They are all trained. You can ask for some of our fitters that work here to talk you through your game and really figure out what you think would be best. I mean, that's we do that on a daily basis here, so it's not something we're not used to. And yeah, I mean,
they're really good at asking the right questions that will guide you into the right product type, I think.
Obviously we have about 1,000 different locations to get fit into with our fitting program. So we recommend in person and, actual showing your swing. But yeah, we're working on some ways to help that out there too, digitally. So that's in the works.
Okay. This question is an interesting one that I get a lot from about all brands now. Are there any plans designed for lady golfers in club specific?
I mean, we already have that in a lot of different.
I mean, at the higher performance level, or do you think your clubs are virtually unisex and can be played by all?
That's correct. With shaft, shaft differentiation. Yes. The E series would be wonderful. I mean, Hot Launch 522 is basically made for anybody looking for added launch, extreme playability, just getting the ball up in the air, getting it to go forward and straight. That's what they're made for. And so it doesn't matter.
I feel like I should be playing that.
It does not matter who you are. It does not. It will get you into the right shaft, and you will reap those benefits.
When you are looking at drivers, and we are so far advanced compared to where we were just a few years ago, and someone says, well, they can't do anything, like they're the same. And, you get the same conversation that I related a lot back to the nutrition world, which clearly this body's built by the nutrition world, but where everybody sees a test somewhere that this herb did this, and all of a sudden that person that it works, the bro science that exists. But when you see this and you hear that we have a USGA limit on right there and how fast a driver can go, how infuriating is it? And it's not really the right word, but I'm going to run with that how much has been done to help golfers, and drivers are nowhere near being done or where they are. Because I was just going through some data from 8 years ago, and we were looking at the driver models. And if you wanted anything in the realm of this, it was tour issue. Like you had to go tour issue to get something open, low spin that still had any area at all of forgiveness. Now we have these clubs that are super easy to launch because the weight has been removed from the top. All the CG is below where the ball is going to be at impact. We have clubs that are going to get you close to max speed around the perimeter, at least close to it. And we're not seeing massive amounts of offset, yet you still have capabilities to help somebody. Where can we possibly go? I mean, I've seen at one event I was at with a company where a driver had no crown, and it was super weird looking. But where can we possibly go are we to the point where we're going to see it's going to be the same speed no matter where you hit it across the face? I mean, are we getting there?
I mean, that would, of course, be the ultimate dream if we could ever achieve that. I think just by the amount of energy that's lost in mass transfer because something is off center from the center of gravity, we'll never quite get there. I think that is the biggest thing that we're always looking at is maximum forgiveness across the entire face. And of course, so, where we're at in golf, this driver from last year's, it's not like, it's just not realistic to say this one's going to go 15 yards longer, but it might go 15 yards longer for you if the last driver that you were fit into just wasn't right for you, because we are, with each driver, we're really fine tuning CG properties for certain characteristics. We're trying to give more options for fitting and, just increase ball speed on certain types of swings. And so that's very fine tuning of CG properties by all of the extra mass that we have available. So that's kind of the biggest thing that we're trying to do. And it's frustrating when somebody says there's nowhere to go or there's nothing else to do. But everybody, when you go to and get fit for a driver, one is definitely going to perform better for you. And that's just all of these minor tweaks, and they can end up being major tweaks over the course of a year, 2 years, 3 years, and we're getting to where these drivers are just going to keep getting easier and easier to hit across the entire face.
So you'd mentioned the face, and we couldn't talk about your guys' products without talking about Diamond Face, which if you have a pull apart there, you should show them what the inside looks like. It's freaking cool, and it is unlike just about everything else in the industry. Now, it's evolved compared to what it was previously. Can you kind of walk through that? It's not some marketing gimmick. It makes sense, and it makes sense at every level and at every skill level, actually.
Yeah, so sure. The Diamond Face kind of spans the entire face.
For those wondering, that's Jon's messaging and massaging of those words. He created Diamond Face.
Yep. And so it spans the entire face. I think 41 diamonds or something like that on the C driver, and maybe a few more on the E, just because the face is a little bit larger. There's 7 different thicknesses of diamonds, so they're slightly thicker, kind of around this very center area of contact, because that's really the area where we don't need a whole lot of help from a CT or ball speed perspective. And then they get thinner out as we go to the heel and the toe. Now, when we say thinner, we're talking in, 0.1 of millimeter. So it's not a ton, but we found, through a lot of fine tuning and maybe 15 different iterations of face type, we've kind of got to something that we have really good durability, really good ball speed across the entire face, while being, allowed to do this, diamond face type of a thing. And that's what it allows it to do, is basically have the thicker areas, or the thinner areas are kind of supported by the thicker areas. So, hitting it kind of ties in the whole face together. And I think one of the other marketing things that we use is it's a bunch of mini trampolines that are on the face in various locations that kind of all work together to create really nice ball speed across the entire face.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you with that. And I heard a rumor that if your driver, the specific driver this year, did not have slightly thicker at the dead middle, it would be too fast and deemed illegal because it's that fast. Is that true?
I don't know. I'm not going to comment on that. I haven't heard any trouble.
I don't know where that came. I haven't heard that.
I heard that the Diamond Face in some ways had to slow it down because it's extremely fast.
In center face?
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, that's probably, that comment's probably true for just about everybody's driver. I think if you took apart,
man, I gave you a gateway into this, and
I know.
No, I'm just kidding.
But I think almost all drivers are probably going to have slightly thicker material at center face, just because we don't need to increase ball speed at center face. Based on materials, how thin we're actually able to go and still pass durability. It's not to say that we can, but we could easily create illegal drivers with the material that we have right now at center face that would also pass durability. I wish we could. It would be really cool for some people if we could just make super.
You can for
drivers.
some people.
Yeah.
Nobody will ever know, Jon. It'll be our secret.
But so, yeah, that's definitely part of the reason why we need to thicken it up at center face. And then it gives us the ability to have, really consistent CT and ball speed across the entire face. We're seeing going out 3/4 of an inch on the heel and toe that we're only seeing 1 to 1.5 mile per hour of ball speed drop, which I think if you compared that to our faces from,
so if we're looking at this, we're talking about hitting these diagonal
just
lines
to the outside of the diamond on the heel and the toe, maybe, and pretty much the same with up and down. And, I would say, if we ran this testing compared to one of a Tour Edge driver from even just 3 or 4 years ago, that ball speed drop was probably closer to 3 to 4 miles per hour. And then from 10 years ago, that ball speed drop was probably closer to 5, 6, 7 miles per hour. So when people do say that, there's,
and that sounds like a small number, but that's a lot of yards.
It's a lot of yards. If you're giving up 10 miles per hour ball speed, that's probably pushing 25 to 30 yards.
It's amazing what you're seeing out on tour with the new designs. When the pro right away, he'll be hitting with you and he'll turn and say, "Oh, that was toey," and then you look at the result and you're like, "That was toey." It's just it's pretty ridiculous what you're seeing as far as how far you can get away with something these days off center and still have it be online.
How far inside the box does Tour Edge have to stay to reach a price point? And what I say by that is you guys have been this, I don't want to call it a value brand because that's not really the case. And that comes off as less than premium because that's just not the case. The Exotics is as premium as anybody out there. But how do you keep yourself inside a box of a price point? And does it have to be different than everybody else? Or do you just run with it and we'll figure that part out after the fact?
No, we're okay with our profit margins. I think the bigger guys have fallen in love with making an X amount per club head these days. And, I think it's way higher than what we're accepting.
Yeah. I mean, I would say on Exotics product, there's nothing that is off the table as far as being outside of the box. Of course, so when we move down to hot launch, like we can't necessarily afford to put an adjustability sleeve on a hot launch driver and sell it for what we want.
Yeah, you're not going to have a tungsten sole on a hot launch driver.
Exactly. But so like with the Exotics product, and, I think that, which we haven't talked about at all, the C Fairway, is a huge example of a product that we've thrown just about everything at it. It's titanium. It has a carbon crown. It's got a tungsten sole. It's adjustable.
90-gram tungsten sole.
And while, of course, it's more expensive than our fairway wood was last year, if you compare it to comparable fairway woods, it's an extreme bargain.
For a all titanium design. Absolutely.
But it's really cool. I think just from like what Jon said, we're comfortable with where we're at as far as profit margins and all that stuff, that we're still in the Exotics world able to throw just about anything we want at it. And, sell it for what we really don't have to stay inside of a box too much.
This is the same carbon fiber you'll find on any fairway. We've always taken major pride in the fact that we with Exotics go all out with materials. We go for the highest grade materials possible, and we just keep raising the bar instead of lowering the bar. And yeah, our prices are creeping up there a little bit, but you compare them to where they've creeped up other places, and that's how we win our battles.
Well, and I still go back to when this is long before THP, but I bought a liquid metal driver that was over $500 because I had to have it. So, I mean, that's 30 years ago, 35 years ago, probably. And it's more than most of the drivers on the market are now. So they may have come down in price as manufacturing got cheaper, but and I believe that we're going to have to hit some sort
That's
of.
how we established Exotics for what we are today. Is we came out with CB originally was what, 450?
Yeah.
3-wood, and nobody had ever heard of that, and it made people want to check us out. And could we do that today? We probably could. I mean, I feel like this C722 is the biggest kind of tribute to what we started with Exotics Fairways and why we're known as a fairway company. CB, CB1, CB4 Tour, all the way
CB4 Tour. Everybody had a CB4 Tour.
All the way to CBX and EXS 220 was one of our better fairway designs. I think this goes all the way back to how great those were. I mean, Scott McCarron had not been playing any fairway wood of ours, even over the last few years as a staffer. He just couldn't get them right. We came out with the C, and he gained 12 yards over his last 3-wood. He couldn't be more happy. I mean, so this thing is a low-spinning beast for faster swingers. But it also has this nice launch angle with 90 grams in the sole. It's getting it, but the weight is forward as well. So the CG is just perfected to the point where you're going to get these low spinning beasts, but they're going to be with a nice healthy launch angle, and it's going to get you.
Like in some ways, you just said Matt's no longer needed.
No, he needs to keep perfecting this thing because he's brought us back to the heyday of where we once were with fairways. I think we actually have an edge on people now when it comes to looking at fairway metals.
I brought this one up, and I'm not going to keep you guys here too much longer because Diamond Phase has evolved a little bit, but can it improve from the current iteration? It seems like you're getting there to where it's almost perfect.
Well, every iteration has been different. So
Right.
Diamond Face 1.0, Diamond Face 2.0, Diamond Face VFT is basically the third iteration. It keeps growing up and evolving. The next one will probably keep the name Diamond Face VFT, but it'll be the fourth iteration. So every time we come out with something new, Diamond Face is adjusted just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. I think we've looked at the shape of the diamonds. We're not wedded to diamonds. If we don't have to, we look at the shape of the diamonds, the size. We've looked at modifying, the center face diamonds at a different size than the heel and toe diamonds. The other thing to mention is that, one of the reasons that we were kind of able to do what we did with the thinner diamonds out on the heel and the toe were largely related to Ridgeback. By getting rid of all the titanium out on the heel and the toe here, we've really kind of created this, flexing structure out on the heel and the toe that kind of removes a little bit of the stress away from the face. So that is one thing. So while the diamond face will change, it also kind of works together in our FEA software with what we do to this Ridgeback structure. We've really seen a lot of, one thing, the Ridgeback structure seems to create a really, really nice sound, but it's also one of the things that's helping out a ton as far as the ball speed goes across the entire face. So
it does sound really good. And I'm going to finish with this question because I don't know how to pronounce it.
Viber Core.
Viber Core. Okay.
Not Vibra.
See, that's where I was wrong.
It's Viber Core.
Viber Core. Well, guys, I want to thank you guys for joining us today. The guys, obviously, if you still have questions, I want you to go to the forum thread and drop it in there. I'll make sure if I can't answer it that I can get Jon or Matt to get me the answers and chime in and drop those for you. And we have a lot more coming from these guys, including some reviews coming up, and we have some testing coming up next week that we're going to film for you guys on the different irons as well. So for myself and Jon and Matt, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us on
guys.
for the hour. It was awesome.